Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to this eSports Report. Puckett here with Benson, and of course today's episode is presented by Xbox One, the official console of MLG. Today on the show, we're talking about Formal's big night for Optic Gaming last night. We'll be taking a look at Drift Hardpoint, go a little bit deeper with that, and of course take a look at the action that is coming up tonight in Day 3 of the Pro League. But Ben, let's start things off by looking back. Our first match of last night was Elevate going up against an Epsilon lineup that didn't start off too hot on Monday.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a struggle for them, but of course this is Elevate. For any of you that don't know, this was a third place finishing team at the X Games, walked away with a bronze medal. They looked to make some moves though, to push themselves ahead of the competition and try and compete with Optic Gaming. And of course, new rosters were made. Roster Mania tends to happen, of course, Apathy, Saints, Select, and Classic.
Now, I gotta ask you here, what did you think when Elevate announced that they were dropping kind of the youngsters that they had so much success with? They got all the way to a bronze medal with TJ and Temp. What did you think of the move to pick up Apathy and Saints in that place?
I mean, you look at Temp and just how solid he was. A lot of people looked at his stats and said, oh, this is a player who can only really play online, can't carry it through to LAN. He proved a lot of people wrong because he can definitely carry those stats across. I mean, we saw him do it at X Games, for example. So it's a little bit of a strange move. I think it's fair. I think it came very unexpected. You could maybe look at TJ and argue that made sense, but I think dropping Temp, something may have gone on in the back end that we don't really know about.
Well, Elevate, they went with the veterans, and, well, to be honest, I think they might have been a little bit concerned after maps 1 and 2. Elevate found themselves down 0-2. We saw it was Epsilon taking Hardpoint. They won that one 202 to 184 on Drift, and they followed it up with a pretty dominant 6-3 finish on Riot Search and Destroy.
Yeah, Swanee had a great Search and Destroy. He was playing out of his mind. You saw that Epsilon team and you thought, okay, this is a team that looks as if they're going to compete. And then, heading into Game 3, though, that's when things took a big, drastic turn for Epsilon, and Elevate really started to turn on the heat. And one of the key players in this series was actually Apathy. Had a fantastic uplane, Chris.
Yeah, look at those numbers there in the lower third. 35 kills, just 15 deaths, 8 uplinks. So he was all over the game, getting the kills, not dying, and putting in the objective. Here's a look at him with one of the many dunks in this game. Elevate jumped out to a 5-0 lead. I thought that was kind of a big statement in the first half. A little bit later, you can see it was Apathy just controlling the base, continuing to put the dunks in. Total dominance in the first side, and this was a little bit of a sigh of relief for all of us casters who made our predictions last night.
Oh, it was.
All of us were very high on Elevate. After games 1 and 2, I wasn't so sure about my pick.
Yeah, going into it, it was very shaky, that's for sure, but the Elevate really turned on the heat. Managed to come back, and one of the really, really big storylines I want you to take a look at the very end of this game when the scoreboard comes up is just look at Remy and how he underperformed. A 15 and 29 performance from him. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge factor to really why they weren't able to compete with Elevate.
And Nagafen, only 17 kills in this game as well. It seemed that when they were struggling on Epsilon, it was kind of a team issue as multiple players were not able to get it going. Game number 4, though, you're still in the lead if you're Epsilon, 2-1. You can't close it out in the second hardpoint, and this was a bit surprising to me after seeing Epsilon so successful on maps like Retreat. I expected Swine to kind of dominate with the bow, but again, it was Apathy, kind of the star player of Game 4.
He had a great series, and this was on host for Epsilon as well. So you go into that thinking, okay, they have that extra advantage, but Elevate just straight refusing to die, and of course that takes it all the way to a game number 5. We love game 5s, Chris.
Always love game 5s, always hoping for round 11. In this one, I was cheering for Epsilon. Let's take a look at some of the action, though, from round 10. You see Royalty, last man standing in the 1v2. Saints and Slack left alive. Royalty rotating all over the map, and he is going to get cut down. That was a 6-4 finish for Elevate after dropping the first 2 maps. They come back, win 3 straight. Pretty incredible performance as the veterans clutched up.
Yeah, props, of course, to Elevate. First league game, coming out, getting that win. But I have to say, Epsilon crumbled that. 2-0 up, they allow a comeback, and they ultimately lose 3-2. More importantly, that actually puts them at 0-2 to start the season.
A little bit of a rough start. It's a relegation team, so not a whole lot of high expectations for them yet. But
I mean, they did look very good at the relegation tournament.
My concern for this Epsilon lineup is fighting back from when they're down. The whole time we saw them see success at the relegation tournament, they were in the lead. They were winning the series. So, again, this is another kind of warning flag I see where if you're up by that much, how come you can't close it out in the second hard point? How do you fall apart in that second search and destroy? But I think when you look at the Elevate lineup, there was clearly one man who led the charge. Let's take a look at a few of the numbers from Apathy here on his first night of Pro League. This is a man who failed to qualify with Prophecy, and just now that he's into Pro League, he's dropping serious numbers, a 1.29. The big difference, though, is the disparity between his KD when they're winning and when they're losing.
Yeah, it's a pretty big difference. I mean, KD during a map win is 1.54. KD during a map loss is 0.59, and that really emphasizes just how much of the X factor he is. That's kind of what we mean when we talk about that X factor. If he's playing well, the team is most likely going to do good. Obviously, when he isn't playing well, they're going to struggle, and that was really the case in that series. And one of the big fights, which was really going on throughout the entire series, was really the Apathy versus Royalty battle, which was going on in almost every single map. And to be honest with you, it was one which you really couldn't keep your eyes off. And what I decided to do was go and take a further look into that and compare the amount of kills across the entire series. So there you see in Hardpoint, Epsilon win, Royalty drops 41, Apathy drops 31. Now, not a bad performance by him by any means of the imagination. S&D, Epsilon win as well.
Yeah, pretty close.
Pretty close, 6-5. Now, map 3 was a swing map right there, Uplink. That's where everything kind of turns around. It was a 35-22 performance. Elevate, obviously, this is where they start the comeback. I'll get back to that in a little bit. Moving on to Hardpoint, Elevate win that one. Now, Royalty did outslay 41-39, but the big note for this is Remy finishes 25-39, Nagafen finishes 28-37. That's a huge, huge effect. Massive effect is the reason why Elevate was able to win that. And then, of course, Game 5, Search and Destroy. Apathy, 6 kills, Royalty 3. You can argue that Royalty definitely slowed down, considering that goes all the way to a Game 10.
Royalty definitely one of the most impressive players to watch when he's hot. You can tell when he's nervous as well.
Right.
In that Game 5, not able to get much going.
Now, getting back to that Game 3, the Uplink Elevate win. 35-22, that's a very, very big discrepancy, and you can kind of see the X factor Apathy kicking in. So again, want to go a little bit further in depth into that game and take a look how those two players compared during the game, kills per minute. Now, you can see, red obviously is going to be Apathy, blue is going to be Royalty. Apathy starts off great. Within the first, 2 minutes, 9 kills, 3 minutes, 13 kills. Royalty, trying his best at 7. Then at the 4-minute mark, you can really see Apathy starting to take away 18 kills. That's a huge, huge difference. And yeah, okay, for that 4th to 5 minute, he only picked up 1 kill. Spikes back up to 24. Royalty's still behind at this point, and he was playing that chase game, to be honest, for the whole game. He really was, but the key really is the final 2 minutes of the game. Royalty averages a kill a minute. He goes from 20 to 22 kills in the final couple of minutes, which just simply isn't good enough, as opposed to Apathy, who, he goes from 27 to 35 kills. That final hill, you can essentially see he goes from 29 to 35 kills. He just turned up when his team needed him the most.
Knowing that Royalty is an SMG player, do you think this is an issue that Prophecy just had, Elevate just had too much control of the base here? Or what's going wrong for the youngster from Canada?
So you kind of look at it, and JP was telling me, the score in the Detroit Uplink got a little bit out of hand. So that final 2 minutes, Royalty's going to have his head down for sure. There was a little bit of spawn trapping going on. And overall, it was just a great confidence performance from the guys over at Elevate, and it really was the spark which triggered this whole comeback, Chris.
After watching them on day number 1 for Elevate, their first matchup, how strong is this squad?
Very strong. Very strong. I'm excited to see what they can do. You look at that team and you kind of thought, okay, immediate flag on the play. Who's going to run that main AR? Seems like they have all the positions sorted out, the roles sorted out, because you look at them and you think, okay, on a map like Compound, of course, new to Season 3, they're going to be great, because they have so many aggressive players who can run that sub and get in your face, force those gun engagements. But on a bigger map, like your Solas, etc., where you're going to need to have defined roles as who's running your assault rifle, they may have struggled. But so far, got to give them props. They look good. And, they were 2-0 down in that series and managed to make a 3-2 comeback. That's impressive.
Pretty nice finish. Slow start. They're going to have to start a little bit hotter if they want to hang with some of the big dogs.
That's definitely going to be a key.
Speaking of the big dogs, all eyes are always on Optic Gaming. They're kind of the clear favorite when it comes to top pro teams in Advanced Warfare. Last night, when we talked about the matchup Optic Gaming versus ISO, everyone in the bullpen said this should be a 3-0. This should totally be Optic Gaming showing dominance. ISO has struggled in Search and Destroy. Their best game mode is Hardpoint, but Optic Gaming is just a juggernaut when it comes to slaying and respawn game modes. I think everyone was a bit surprised when ISO was able to steal game number 1.
So this was the interesting thing. You think Hardpoint, and if I just say Hardpoint to you, you immediately think, all right, Optic's very, very good at that. But it was a drift Hardpoint, and that was the key, because the day before you saw Optic play Envious and they didn't look good. It was the first time they'd actually ever played that map, and arguably Envy should have taken that. So you go into that thinking, okay, it's ISO on host. playing a map which we know Optic isn't very good at. ISO's a team who grind. They are going to know that map very well. So for me, that was that moment. ISO needed to win that. If they didn't win that map, the series was completely over. They didn't stand a chance. And they came out and clutched up on the final hill. It was a really good performance from them.
Now, what was even more surprising than them winning game number 1 for me was what they did in game number 2. This was not a blowout. This was a very close S&D. Optic, not known for being the most dominant search and destroy crew out there. ISO was going toe-to-toe with him up until the finish. Optic able to close it out in a round.
I mean, yesterday we talked about the series and we were saying, ISO need to win the search and destroys. That's key. They just need to steal a hard point. They start off the series stealing a hard point, or stealing a respawn in general. You could have gone for the uplink, but they do that, and then they drop the search and destroy. It was such a heartbreak for them. Losing 6-4. You kind of look at it, series tied at 1-1, made game 3 even more interesting. Of course, that was a comeback uplink, and this is where it gets a little bit silly in terms of some of the statistics that we talk about here, Chris.
Yeah, speaking of silly, here's a look at him kind of controlling the base. The points coming in pretty close early on, as you see. This was a tight fight the whole way. At the end of your 5 minutes, Optic Gaming with a pretty nice lead here at the half. But when you look at kind of the kills in this first side, you can see Llama God was really taking over. 17 and 10 in our first 5 minutes.
And you see right at the very end of the half, they managed to get a beautiful 2-point play using the pass feature. But it was the second half where really Formal came into his own, and got to give Formal some massive props. He actually broke yesterday the Pro League record for kills in an uplink with 42 kills. And it also, of course, sets the record for Season 3, only 2 days old at this point, so still time for that to be broken. And that really is a big question. Can that record be broken from Formal? But one of the key factors going into that was the performance of that man on your screen right there, Crimsix. Having a bit of frame rate lag, it seemed, that was what he was tweeting after the game. Ultimately ends up finishing with just 9 kills. Pretty poor performance from him, but it allowed Formal to get a lot more. And of course, right at the very end of the game, as you just saw there, a huge misplay from ISO. Arguably, they could have taken this respawn. And again, that begs the question, this is the relegation team coming through, playing against the best team in the game, Chris, and keeping it close.
Look at that, 42 and 26 from Formal. As you mentioned, Crim, just 9 kills. That was probably the most shocking part of that game 3. At the end, guys, a 15-14 victory for Optic Gaming. That is scary.
It's absurd. The fact that Crim can drop just 9 kills and they can still win is ridiculous. I mean, yeah, we look at that and we say ISO did really well hanging with one of the best teams in the game, but how many games realistically is Crim only going to drop 9 kills in? Not that many. Which again goes back to that question. Okay, congratulations, of course, to Formal for the Season 3 record so far, 42 kills, but again, is he likely to do that again? Maybe not.
Karma was around 31-29, Scump 28-29. So his teammates weren't dropping massive kills, but I do think this was a huge game out of Formal.
Oh, he stepped up.
I definitely think he's capable of doing something similar again in the future, regardless of how Crim is playing. But as you said, Crim had more points than he had
more uplinks than he had kills. 10 uplinks, 9 kills. Not statistics you're likely to see from Crimsix again.
Well, Optic made it entertaining, just like they did on day number 1, but in game number 4, they were able to close things out. Let's take a look at some of the action from Hardpoint. Here's a look at Scump, who started off very hot on a 3 streak, 8-5 in your first minute and a half. But Ben, kind of talk me through this Detroit Hardpoint. What did you see from the OG crew?
So we moved over to Optic Gaming Host. That was the key here. ISO opted for 1, 2, and 5, or OG opted for 3 and 4. And you kind of looked at it, and you, again, Crimsix going to be struggling, still having that frame rate lag in this game, as he did in the previous one. So we kind of went into this knowing that Crim was going to be essentially baiting a lot for his teammates. And you saw Crim do a great job of that. I know afterwards he wasn't really too pleased with how he was being forced to play. Obviously, factors outside of his hands, but this game really was back and forth. It was surprisingly close, and I kind of take it with a pinch of salt because Crim obviously had some issues, but still, this was a great performance from the guys at ISO, and I'm excited to see where they finish at the end of the season.
Optic was off to the hot start, but you have to credit ISO for the way they played throughout. You see, still 6 minutes left on the clock. The difference in score, 30 points. That's pretty significant in the first half. It was the SMGs that really impressed me from ISO throughout the night. Silly, I thought, had some of the best respawn games, and I thought Llama God was basically, if not their best player, consistently their second best player. I think this ISO team, they've showed how strong they are in Hardpoint. They were able to take one away from Optic Gaming to be able to finish this one within 6 points. I think a lot of people have been sleeping on ISO, calling them warriors. I think this is a team to look out for as a definite top 4 threat going into the rest of the season.
I mean, especially when you consider you break down the entire series. You know, that search and destroy made a couple of mistakes in that, ultimately lose 6-4. The uplink, big misplay at the very end of that game. Arguably could have stolen that, if not even just forced an overtime. So you look at their overall performance in multiple game types and you think, okay, this is a team which can definitely hang, and if they can continue at the pace they're at, and this is the key for me, obviously there's only 22 games this season, no longer 44. If they can keep this pace up for, you know, maybe the next 5-6 games, they could be in a great position.
If you're going to take a loss, it might as well be to the #1 team in the game.
Right.
The one thing you did see on the scoreboard there in that last set of plays was there was a 30-point advantage for ISO with 2:40 left. Optic Gaming kind of showing their true grit in the last 40 seconds of this hard point. That was really where we saw the game go back in their favor.
And that was basically down to Scumpy. He just started going out of his mind. He went on a 5 streak inside the garage hill. Second to last hard point, he just locked it down with the support play of his Bals outside. I mean, you can see him right now, 39 and 27 on the screen. And then Crimsix, ironically, the 1-2 piece that you need him to get, he comes up and gets. So it was a great performance from him on the final hill. And what made it very interesting was ISO were really smart. They used a smoke grenade to try and break into the hard point. It worked, but then Optic used that same smoke grenade to retake the final hill. So it was kind of like a great strat, but Optic smartly used it against ISO as well. So again, this game could have gone differently.
Detroit, I think, is becoming my favorite hardpoint map after watching all of these nail-biter finishes. This one, 216 to 210 in favor of Optic. 40 bomb coming out of Silly. You saw Dito with 39. On the other end, it was Scumpy dropping 41. So pretty good night again from Optic Gaming. Better than it was their first time around against Envy. It didn't go to a Game 5 this time around, but I have to ask you, Ben, are other teams catching up to Optic Gaming, or are they slipping a little bit here in our first week?
I mean, you take a look at a couple of the series they played. A couple of new maps have been involved. Obviously, you know, Scumpy had a birthday yesterday. He was clearly trying to rush off and get towards that. So a couple of external factors. I think teams are definitely improving. I mean, you look at that FaZe team, I think that's one team who can definitely go toe-to-toe consistently. There are a couple of other teams still a little slacking, but I feel this season more than ever, the opportunity to maybe steal a couple of maps, maybe in a series against them, is more likely than it was in Season 2.
Optic Gaming goes up 2-0 so far in the Pro League. Perfect record despite playing 9 of the 10 potential games. On to a different squad now. This is the other Optic. Optic Nation showed a different Optic Nation than what we were used to from Season 2. It's about time, Ben. What did you see from the other half of the green wall?
You know, as you mentioned, they finally start to turn things around a little bit. Game 1, a solo hardpoint, and all eyes really on Mochilla for me throughout this whole series. They bring him onto the team in replace of Killer. Questions, you know, how's he going to do in Search and Destroy? How's he going to do in Respawn? You have to say that move primarily for Respawn. He's going to kill more things than Killer consistently, and then you obviously have 3/4 of the Prophecy team, which did so well at Call of Duty World Championship. So, you know, Owen facing up against TK for the first matchup, and Miracles throughout this entire series as well had phenomenal aggressive SMG play. A lot of pro players have been saying, you know, Miracle's extremely underrated. People aren't giving him as much love as he deserves. He's a fantastic player, and he drops just massive numbers this series.
You see the 40 bomb going into the end there, 227 to 151. It honestly wasn't very close the entire way through as Miracles finishes with 44. On the other side, Nameless dropping a 50 bomb on his first night, 47 kills here. The second time in an opening hard point. This has to be so frustrating now for Nameless, and you got to question, is it the team? Is it the roster? That is an issue for Team Caliber right now because you are getting some stellar individual performances.
I mean, it's very strange. For someone to drop 47 kills for the loss, you know, Nameless is doing everything he possibly can. He's doing everything right. And it is at that point where I feel so sorry for him because he sat there saying, guys, there is nothing more I can possibly do in this series. Like, he can essentially breathe a sigh of release. This isn't one of those situations where someone is running around the map just playing for kills.
Right.
Nameless is doing exactly what he needs to do. You've got to look at the other 3 players to really try and step things up, which is super ironic when you consider those 3 players have previously teamed together. So you'd expect that natural chemistry to kind of come back, whether they maybe picked up a couple of bad habits from some of the teams when they haven't been playing together, and they're trying to shake that. Obviously, something right now isn't clicking.
Team Caliber always says that their online play is their weakness. They can't move into the team house soon enough, especially in these respawns. Another unfortunate loss there. Let's talk about the Biolab Search and Destroy, though. Team Caliber struggling in respawn shows they still got it in Search and Destroy, and I think a lot of this credit belongs to Neslo.
Yeah, Neslo, a great Search and Destroy play, but really when you break down that game, there was a couple of misplays that came in from Optic Nation. I mean, they tried to force the A bomb site a lot, and TK just kind of sat there and said, Are you going to wrap? Are you going to try and cycle over towards B? No, you're just going to stay there? Okay, we'll wait it out. And a lot of those situations when Optic Nation were on the attacking side, they were basically forced to play against the clock, which is never really the situation you want to be in. And TK, a team in Search and Destroy who are going to take full advantage of that. You can't do that against a team like that. And, winning those Search and Destroys again.
Feeling good in Search. It's all tied up 1-1. That brings us to the swing game. Uplink once again. The comeback is the map, and you're going to see a few of the highlights here. Optic Nation taking a very narrow victory overall, 16-13 in this one. But let's take a look at some of the highlights on how we got here. Early on, it was all Optic Nation, 8-1 to open things up. Nameless able to attack a two-pointer on TK, starting to mount a bit of a comeback. But in the first half, I think the slaying was the difference. You see Nameless and Sharp, just 5 kills and 4 kills, weren't able to get much going. On the other side, Optic Nation, no real stellar slayers outside of Embos.
Yeah, Embo's putting up the most amount of kills thus far into the game at least. But you can see very back and forth. And again, you hate to point fingers at players, but look at that TK scoreboard. 14 and 18, 16 and 16 performance. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're not going massively negative, but you compare that to, Theory, who's dropping 29. You got Nesla there dropping 24. They just need a little bit more. And, final couple of minutes, TK do go into the lead, but very, very close ending. It ultimately ends up finishing 16-13 in favor of Optic Nation. Close, but regardless, a win is a win.
Yeah, and you see in that last 60 seconds, it was tied up at 13 apiece. This was just simple map control from Nation. They did a nice job controlling the TK base. There's the toss going through, and you're going to see Nation pulling away with a 2-1 advantage. The action just continued here from Nation all the way to the end, and that led to a game number 4, Ben.
Well, before we get to that game number 4, there was one standout play for me that happened in this series. We were talking about what we were going to do for Monday's show as a kind of like a weekly review of what happened. Want to try and compile a couple of top 5s. This one play from Miracles so far is my number 1 play.
This is number 1?
It's so far, man. This was an absolutely awesome play. Questions whether he meant to do it, whether he didn't mean to do it. Most likely he didn't mean it. But nevertheless, this was an absolutely awesome play. Miracles has the drone, going for the 15-second reset, throws it his opposition, double jump, stomps down, picks up the drone, plays it for 15 just before he dies. An awesome, awesome play coming in there for Miracles.
Now, what made that so sweet? The fact that...
It's the fact that he's last man alive, he has the drone in his hand, and he needs to play that drone for 15 because you can see TK's about to get a lot of momentum. Now, as he's going up the stairs, he clearly goes to throw it. TK player a little bit unfortunate, he picks up the drone. But the quick reaction, a knowledge of Miracles that if he just double jumps and slams down, he's picking up that kill. He does that, gets the kill, then gets the 15-second reset to allow his teammates back some time, get back some map control, try and get control of Glass. It was a massive play from him.
Things could have gone totally differently if that didn't
They could have done. They really could have done. And it's pretty scary to kind of think about that. One small play changes the game massively, but big props to Miracles. So far, as I said, one of the top plays I've seen this season.
The man's got some nasty reaction time, and you saw it there with the drop kick. So, Nation up 2-1.
Yes.
TK struggling in their respawn game modes. It continued in game number 4. Let's take a look at some of the action from Compound Hardpoint. Now, this is a newer map, Ben.
Yep.
Constant chaos. Talk to me a little bit about what we saw in that match.
So I kind of looked at it and I thought, okay, this is a very small map. Potentially you'll see 4 SMGs. And that could potentially just be that aggression. You're going to see lots of kills. It's going to be crazy to cast. There's going to be so much action because the size of the map is so small. Think of it as kind of like a Rust, old school Call of Duty, very, very small. But it turned out that wasn't really the way the map was being played out. You saw a couple of ARs being played. Mochilla, he came out, dropped some serious numbers when he pulled out his assault rifle. Great slaying from him. This is a look at his stats from yesterday. A 1.12 overall KD, S&D at 1.29, slaying rating at 34.18. And again, bear in mind with no CTF in Season 3, that slayer rating across the board for all players will probably be inflated because there's now no respawn delay being put in, or as big of a respawn delay. Hardpoint KD 1.16, uplink 0.96, hardpoint defense coming in at 5. Massive X factor for me in this series, and ultimately one of the big reasons that Optic Nation was able to win that compound hardpoint, because what happened was you kind of saw a look at Nameless, who was like, well, right now stuff isn't really going my way. What should we do? Should I potentially pull out Val? Should I try and compete with that, or should I keep running an SMG? And you saw Nameless doing a great job of slaying once again, like he has done. But then all of a sudden he pulled out an SMG, and it was kind of like, well, what was that decision? He was doing great with the bow, leading his team, pulls out the SMG, and Moch at that point just went off with the assault rifle. I would have loved to have seen the amount of kills he got in the second rotation compared to the first rotation, because at that point, Nameless couldn't challenge him from distance, and Moch was picking up free kills, allowing his teammates to lock it down, and they ultimately win 250 to 126, Chris.
Yesterday we talked about what Moch brings to the table in Search and Destroy. That graphic you just saw speaks to what he brings to the table in Respawn.
It's crazy.
Why haven't more people been on the Moch hype train up to this point?
It's very strange because you look at his performances across all Call of Duty titles. He's been very, very good. One of the most consistent assault rifle players and has nasty, nasty raw ability. But I feel like he has somewhat of a bad reputation in terms of being a teammate. But clearly, playing with the players he is right now, that's not an issue whatsoever. And he's playing happy. Like, you can kind of tell that. He's enjoying playing once again, which is important for a player, I think. If they're having fun playing, they're going to play better. It really is as simple as that. And, Moch now replacing Killer. Some big shoes to fill, essentially. It's a Call of Duty World Champion. Admittedly, wasn't playing the best Call of Duty of his entire career. But still, he's a big icon. A lot of Optic Nation fans kind of love Killer. The woos in chats as soon as Killer would be on stream. It goes crazy. So Moch really did have like a big spot to fill. But so far, got to give him some massive props because he's doing a great job.
And I'm really excited to watch how Miracles is now flourishing since the addition of Moch. I think those are the two Slayers to definitely continue looking out for. They're going to figure out their uplink game. It's still a little shaky in my opinion, but
it has its moments.
You have some incredible talent when it goes to the tosses. Ricky, Bose, and even Moch knows all the spots on how to drain those for the one-pointers. I think this is a team that definitely going to have a lot better statistics this season than last time. Finishing at the bottom of the leaderboard, Optic Nation, definitely, I think, finishing at least in our top 8.
Yeah, they've been a somewhat cursed organization, if you will. They haven't had the best Call of Duty AW life cycle so far, but going into Season 3, they've started well. The question now is, can they continue what they've started?
Now, this was against Team Caliber.
Yes, I know immediately what you're going to say. Not the highest of competition. They've clearly been struggling at the start of Season 3, but still, win is a win. It's going to give them confidence. If they can build upon that confidence when they go up against some higher caliber teams in that kind of second echelon, your Denials, for example, maybe they can compete. I expect some close series from Optic Nation for the rest of the season.
All right, Optic Nation with a big win on their first night. Denial on their second night had to face off against a Rise squad that shocked everybody on Monday after losing their team. TJ Howie goes off on Monday. They get the big victory in their first match of the season. But last night, it was basically all Denial. It started off in game number 1, Biolab Hardpoint. And Ben, I got to ask you, Denial. We talked about this squad, worried that it's 3 Bals. Who's going to be able to switch over to the sub? What did you think about Denial using Slasher kind of as that new SMG man?
I mean, this is the great thing about this Denial squad. I think they're very versatile. A lot of players can kind of switch up their roles. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, Slasher, he may have just fallen off the map there. So, nice highlight reel right there of exactly what Slasher's capable of doing. But still, Rise started off very, very strong. You kind of look at Wheats really as a key player, and we've talked about it a lot on the ESR, but since COD Champs, he played fantastic there. He's continuing through his performances, and he really does look like a very, very good player.
And you can see here at the finish, Temp, around the 5-minute mark, starts heating up with the SMG of his own. Positive numbers for him and Slasher running those roles. And you can see late in the game, big numbers from Temp as he is the first to reach the 40 bomb. No one on the side of Rise able to keep up. The best performance was from Weeds, but at the end, it was 220, 193 in favor of Denial.
And that's exactly why you want players like Hook, like Temp, dropping those consistent numbers and playing so well. But the turning point in this game was actually on the second rotation of Hills when it went over to Blue Hill. We have pretty interesting information about exactly what happened. This is just on that second rotation on Blue Hill, the number of kills which were being picked up per 10-second periods of that final hill, and you can just see, Rise just completely, that's actually flipped. There should be Denial on the other side, but Denial completely outslaying their opposition. It was fantastic. I mean, Denial outscores Rise by 45 to 7 points on that second Blue Hill.
Pretty impressive stuff.
Very impressive stuff. I mean, I think it was like 16 to 8 was the overall kill difference in favor of Denial, and honestly, great performance from them.
45 to 7.
When you think about that,
second to last hard point, that's a massive turnaround coming in from Denial. The difference at the end of the game wasn't that big. It was about 30-some points, so pretty huge turnaround. That's where they won the game. Good way to point that out there. Game number 2, though, Solar S&D. Did you think Rise was going to be able to bounce back?
I mean, you look at it, Rise had a pretty good start. They're a good, talented team in Search and Destroy. Story really in this game was Gunja. Left in so many, 1v1s, 1v2s, 1v3s. A couple of rounds where he was over at the opposite side of the map, didn't follow his team. Got to have a question mark on exactly what was going on there, whether he was just trying to watch the flank or trying to get a pick, see if they could try and rework their route. It just didn't work. And I feel like as a professional player, if something isn't working, you need to try and change things up. And really, Denial just kind of ran away with it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Rise up 3-2, but at the end, it was 4 straight rounds for the Denial squad. You're going to see Goon once again picked off as last man, and that was basically it at the end of your 9 rounds. A quick 2-0 lead in favor of this Denial squad. Replay's fitting in very well with the squad. You saw 3 plants from him in those 9 rounds.
And that's an important thing to point out, because a lot of people have looked at his playstyle as, he's branded as an objective-based player. How is he going to hang when currently objective-based players are essentially just kind of being breeded out of the game? It's more just slay, just kill. But he's still doing a good job for that team, and that's important. He's going to be one of those players, I feel, as if you're a Denial fan, you want to be keeping your eye out for throughout Season 3.
Well, that was a 2-0 start for Denial. Going into game number 3, it was Parliament, yes. Uplink, and...
back to the motherland for me.
This is a map that we saw Denial play TK on in the first night of the Pro League. TK got off to a 3-1 start on the first side, but then it was all replays and Denial taking over the side 2. Playing from the better spawn, they're able to just drain point after point. Last time, able to finish double digits. This time, a low-scoring game, just 6-3 overall, but Denial able to secure the win.
The key for me was replays and its one-point throw spots. We saw a couple of people trying to experiment with different one-point throws. Of course, a brand new map into Season 3, so still players trying to figure it out. But replays has developed a throw where essentially you can't be seen. Like, it's very, very good positioning from him. And, we talk about kind of the post-match analysis of this game, and it's, which player is key to success. It's this man on your screen right now. It's replays. It has to be. He has to be dropping consistent numbers for the team to win. It is that simple. He cannot just rely on his other teammates. Maybe have a couple of maps where you can get away with that. But in terms of consistency, Chris, you can't do that. His
Search and Destroy game has been solid so far. He's continuing to post up solid numbers in the Respawn titles. I'm wondering, can he stay that consistent? I have also really enjoyed the way that we're seeing Slasher and Temp transition from pure battle rolls to now being able to run with the SMG at any point. I was really concerned about that. At least in this matchup against Rise, they seem fairly comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, again, it is Rise, so take that with a pinch of salt. This was a team which was essentially thrown together at the very, very last minute. It's how is this Denial squad really going to go up when they go up against the likes of FaZe and Optic Gaming? That's what we have to keep our eyes out for.
Now, day 1, we saw a ridiculous performance from TJ.
You hopped on the Rise.
He was able to take over. He was the #1 player out of all 32 on day 1 of the Pro League. Last night, his numbers were not as fantastic as I predicted. I was hoping for an upset. It didn't happen. But while TJ was struggling, we saw some of their other teammates struggle as well. I got to ask you, which player needs to step it up in terms of slaying on Rise Nation?
Again, hate to point fingers, but it has to be Gunja. This is a player who, when he was playing under the Team Caliber organization, extremely inconsistent. One map he's going to drop you 40, the next map he's going to drop you, 20. And it's that inconsistency which I feel in Respawn you can't have as a main slayer. And you look at the Rise squad similarities last night. Some maps he'll do extremely well, other maps he sat there and not playing his best Call of Duty. He needs to try and be a little bit more consistent. Whether this is his game or not really sure. Is he struggling with movement? I mean, the game's been out, we're in the final season now. Should be adapting to that a little bit better potentially, but again, needs to step up in slaying if Rise is going to have any success through Season 3.
I think this is going to be one of the tougher teams that Denial will have to, this Rise team will have to play throughout the season. So losing to Denial,
not the end of the world.
Not the end of the world, but you definitely know they're looking to improve. They never want to get 3-0'd. At the end of the day, the maps can have a huge effect when it comes down to tiebreakers.
It can.
So, that was day 2. We got our standings. We got to catch you up. If you haven't been watching for our first 2 days of the Pro League, here's where we stand. Game percentage win belongs to Denial at the top. The 3-0 last night really helping them secure the #1 spot. Optic Gaming, though, right behind them with a 66.7 map win percentage. Then you see Optic Nation. 1-0 start, Same thing could be said with Elevate, but Elevate, they started off very cold, had to go and win 3 straight there to force that game 5.
Down 0-2. I mean, I think this is ironically the highest Celtic Nation has been throughout any of the seasons. So congrats to them on that 3rd place so far. But I expect to see them continue, flourish this season. I think that addition of Moch is big for them. And of course, then you have in 5th, 6th, Rise and Isolation splitting, going 1-1. And that brings us to, of course, the bottom side of the standings. And it's pretty ugly, Chris, for TK and Epsilon there.
Yeah, FaZe and TCM still yet to play, but Envy, they had that heartbreaker against Optic Gaming, lost the game 5 there. Orbit didn't look very strong. You see just 25% of their maps won.
Yeah.
And then TK, I thought they could have done something against Denial. They kind of fell apart in that final search and destroy. Epsilon, though, I think is the one team that I'm looking at and I'm very fearful for.
Yeah, it's not been a great start for them, and we'll have a little bit of a segment about that, talking about later on exactly what they need to change up. But excited to see FaZe and TCM play their first games, especially TCM making a lot of team changes. Should have a good night.
We're going to see FaZe a little bit later on tonight. We're going to commercial break. When we come back, though, we're going to be jumping back into our map preview. We've got some new game modes in the rotation now. Ben's going to walk you through how to play Drift Hardpoint.